Jacob was the son of Isaac and Rebekah, the grandson of Abraham and Sarah, and the father of 12 sons, the progenitors of the 12 tribes of Israel. His name appears for the first time in the book of Genesis, when his mother is pregnant and senses Jacob and his twin brother, Esau, wrestling with each other in her womb. What is the relevance of this sibling fight in their mother's womb? It all originates in the fall of the first human ancestors. Eve's fall was consummated through two different illicit love affairs. The first was the spiritual fall, through her love with the archangel. The second was the physical fall, through her love with Adam, without God's blessing, and while they were still immature. Both Cain and Abel were the fruit of Eve's illicit love. God discriminated between them based on Eve's two illicit acts of love, and placed Cain and Abel in two opposite positions. Cain represented Eve's first fallen act of love with the archangel, so he was chosen to represent evil, and was in a position to relate to Satan. While Abel represented Eve's second act of fallen love, with Adam, so he was chosen to represent goodness, and was in a position to relate to God. According to tradition, it was the eldest son who received the blessing, and the family inheritance. God had to find a way to replace the firstborn son with the youngest. Otherwise, there would be no way for God's will to be passed on to future generations. So God had to establish a dispensation of conflict between brothers, as happened in the life of Jacob and Esau. This explains why Jacob took such an interest in his older brother's birthright. Once, when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in hungry from the field and asked to eat of the stew. Jacob replied, "First sell me your birthright." Esau placed very little value on the birthright, and had no objection to swear an oath, selling his birthright to Jacob in exchange for bread, and a little lentil stew to satisfy his hunger. This is a detail to which scripture scholars do not give due importance. For the first time in the history of providence, the older brother, representing Satan, willingly submitted his position to the younger brother, representing goodness. Of course, this story is not yet over. Time passed, and when Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak that he could no longer see, he called Esau and asked him to go out hunting and prepare a meal for him. After eating, he would give him his blessing. Rebekah hastened to tell Jacob to prepare a tasty meal for his father, and that he would be the one to receive the blessing. Jacob cooked something and went to his father, introducing himself as Esau, the firstborn, and asked for his blessing. Isaac hesitated at first, but finally proceeded to bless him. We must recognize the position of Rebekah, who inspired Jacob to claim the birthright, and then led him to receive the blessing from his father Isaac. Recall that the fall occurred when a woman, Eve, joined with Satan, and together took the man, Adam, from God's side. Therefore, a woman was to join God and bring back the man. Rebekah was brave and took on that role. First, she brought Jacob to God's side, and then together they should bring her husband and her eldest son. From this perspective, we can recognize the rightness of her actions. Esau, who knew that the blessing belonged to his brother, and not to him, should have respected that agreement when he sold him the birthright. However, when Esau learned that his father had already given his blessing to Jacob, he became very angry and wanted to kill his brother, just as Cain had killed Abel. Therefore, Jacob had to leave his family and flee to Haran. Jacob managed to escape from his brother Esau, but in Haran, he met his uncle Laban, who was another Esau in an even more external position. The more opposition and persecution Jacob received from Laban, the more he thought of his native home. Jacob always maintained the certainty that his sacrifice was not for himself, but for the good of the Israelites and his nation, which was God's chosen nation. God blessed Jacob, not for his own individual welfare and prosperity, but so that all Israelites could enjoy that blessing. Jacob worked as his uncle Laban's servant for 21 years. His uncle had promised to give him his youngest daughter, Rachel, as a wife. But after 7 years, Laban deceived Jacob and gave him his eldest daughter, Leah, instead. But Jacob kept silent, worked for another 7 years, and got Rachel. Even after that, his uncle Laban lied to him again and again, trying to cheat him of the possessions God had given him. However, Jacob did not complain. He never forgot the blessing he received from God, and maintained an unwavering faith. Having finished his course in Haran, on his way back to his native home, Jacob prayed desperately at the ford of Jabbok, that God would help Esau to welcome him without hostility. Jacob knew that, if Esau killed him, his providential mission would have ended in failure. And it was there at the ford of Jabbok, that Jacob wrestled with an archangel all night. The human fall occurred when an angel, Lucifer, subdued human beings. Therefore, to restore it, God sent the angel and allowed him to attack Jacob. In fighting the archangel, Jacob risked all his possessions and his children, including himself and his wife. In the end, the archangel had to give up. He could not but say to Jacob, "You have won the battle, you are the victor." He had to bless Jacob with the name, Israel, which meant victor. In all the history of mankind, Jacob was the only one who fought with the archangel and came out victorious. He well deserved the name, the victor. What was the meaning of Jacob's victory over the angel? It was a spiritual victory over the whole angelic world. If Jacob was defeated in the fight with the archangel, all his possessions, all his children, including himself and his wife, could have been taken away, or torn to pieces by satanic hands. However, if he won, all those things would belong to him and to God. After defeating the angel, Jacob headed home to meet his brother Esau. Jacob gave up all his possessions, all his servants and his children, telling his brother that all these belonged to him. After receiving Jacob's gifts, Esau's heart melted. Thus, the two brothers, who until then had felt resentment and hostility towards each other, embraced, shed tears, and blessed each other. At this moment a new era of Israel's history opened, in a higher dimension. Esau also shared the blessing of being Israel, the victor. Some may feel that the Bible ignores the work of women in history. But in Jacob's providential course, Rebekah's role was crucial. Jacob worked hard to win the victory for God, of course. But his mother worked even harder, hundreds of times harder. Rebekah undoubtedly worked hard to change the attitude of Esau and Isaac, repeatedly making sure that they were committed not to kill Jacob. How much depended on Rebekah? She fulfilled a vital mission to make the restoration possible. Only after the reunion with his brother Esau could Jacob be reunited with his parents, whom he had missed for so many years, and enjoy the peace he so longed for. Jacob went to Haran, where he underwent hard labor and untold misery and persecution. Had Jacob not been so well trained under Laban's drudgery, he could not have overcome the archangel at the ford of Jabbok. Then, he had to fight against his brother, Esau, to really be entitled to the blessing. Without the spiritual power after defeating the angel, Jacob could not have melted Esau's heart. All world leaders, especially those in conflict zones, should follow Jacob's life course. True blessing is not in accumulating possessions, but in taking the hard way, and using every blessing to melt the hearts of our enemies, until we transform them into our brothers.